Hey, it's Keeper. Ophelia here. Recently, I started rereading the Keepers of the Lost Cities books, and there's so many things I didn't notice the first time around. Like, why do we never get a real explanation for why Grady and Edeline almost rounded up Sophie? And when did the humans violate the treaty if the sinking of Atlantis was thousands of years before the first nuclear bombs were tested? But maybe the biggest question of all? How do elves live for so long? Well, today I come with you with a theory that answers this question by linking elven lifespan with their bottles of youth. We first hear about this youth in a bottle in the first book when Sophie first meets Elwyn. After an initial checkup on Sophie, he notes that she has significant cell damage, saying, "It's not your fault. Toxic food, toxic water, toxic air. What chance did your poor cells have?" The thing that sticks out to me here is toxic water. I can understand the food and air thing. We use growth hormones and fertilizers in our food, and our air does have a lot of pollutants in it, especially San Diego, where Sophie lives. But we clean and filter our water. How could our water be toxic? Unless it isn't our water at all, but the water the elves are using. This passage makes it clear that elves aren't just beautiful and perfect outright. Edeline even remarks that Sophie looks much brighter and healthier after a few double daily doses of youth in a bottle. And on top of that, elves are drinking these bottles of youth every day. That is insane! You might think of it as like taking a multivitamin, but it's actually a lot different. Think back to when Elwyn told Sophie to drink 2 bottles of youth a day rather than 1 to make up for lost time. You might be thinking, okay, still seems like a multivitamin, but that isn't how multivitamins work. Think of it like filling up a car with gas. Once you've filled it up to the top, you can try to keep putting gas in, but it isn't going to make your car run any faster or smoother. It's just putting more gas in a full tank. It's the same way with vitamins. You can try to ingest more, but it isn't going to do anything. It's just like filling up a full tank with more gas. So if bottles of youth don't act like vitamins, then what are they? To start answering those questions, let's look at some history. Historically, fountains of youth have been long sought after for their magical powers to restore beauty and, as you may have guessed it, youth to those who use them. They've been used in a lot of different media, but I'd like to focus today on one historian who mentions them. His name is Herodotus. He was a Greek historian, alive between 484 and 425 BC, aka a really long time ago. Among his writing, we can see passages on a civilization well known for their longevity and youthfulness, called the Macrobians. I'll read an excerpt from his writing and see if you can see nods to the elven youth in a bottle. When they showed wonder at the number of years, meaning the number of years the Macrobians had been alive, he led them to a fountain, wherein when they had washed, they found their flesh all glossy and sleek, as if they had bathed in oil, and a scent came from the spring like that of violets. If the account of this fountain be true, it would be their constant use of the water which made them so long-lived. Now, if that doesn't sound like youth in a bottle, I don't know what does. He even mentions the sweet smell, like how Sophie mentions that it tastes kind of sweet, and the fact that they're using it constantly. So this must be where elves got their youth in a bottle, right? From these scattered springs. After researching, I thought this was a perfect fit. Until I realized that Herodotus is kind of infamous for twisting history to be more fantastical and storytelling rather than accurate. It's likely that he exaggerated the stories into somewhat of a fantasy. Unless that fantasy wasn't a fantasy at all, but rather a cover-ups the elves used after humans broke the treaty. It would make a lot of sense for the elves to dismiss something accurate to their history in order to keep humans from finding out about them. I'm even willing to guess that an elaborate story was fabricated to keep other humans from finding out about the fountains in the first place. So, would that mean that elves started out as humans but became super advanced after using these fountains? I think so. In fact, consider the other intelligent species. Ogres, goblins, gnomes, trolls, dwarves, etc. They're all incredibly intelligent and advanced civilizations, similar in level to the elves. The only real difference being that every other civilization besides the elves seems to have a niche, something their whole culture is based around. The gnomes garden, the goblins are bodyguards, the ogres are biotechnically advanced and great warriors. Elves don't have the same focus that these other civilizations do. I mean, sure, they have special abilities, but what they do with those abilities varies elf to elf. They're advanced enough to understand individualism, the fact that every sentient thing is different and desires different things. It's almost like the elves started out more advanced than the other species. And that actually makes a lot of sense. Think about it. If humans were using these fountains, it would make sense that other animals were using them too. I mean, imagine being a leopard and then one day you drink from a fountain and on your next hunt, your senses are heightened and you're stronger and faster and able to kill easier. Some animals would probably link this new strength with drinking the water, and they would return to keep drinking it. I'm gonna bet that every single species in the elven world started out as some sort of an animal and just got super advanced by drinking the water. These magic springs could also explain why all of them live so far away from each other. The elves especially, and why they have to depend on light leaping. If the original fountains were scattered all around the earth, the elves probably didn't know that there were other elven civilizations for hundreds or thousands of years. Ophelia, all this talk about elves and magic water is pretty cool, but how come Sophie has never told the water is what makes elves elves, and how does the water even work? I'm glad you asked. For that first point, I'd like to show you my cache. No, not my cache. My cache. Since Neverseen, it's been made a pretty big deal to find out what's inside all of these caches floating around. And supposedly there's a secret so horrible inside of the cache that the counselors use that they literally had to forget it to keep their sanity from being shattered. That's crazy. It's entirely possible that the forgotten secret is the fact that the only thing making them elves is their magic water. Think about it. A secret that can turn basically anyone or anything into an elf. You would not want that secret getting into the wrong hands. It would be practical not only for their sanity, but also for their population numbers. If they were all of a sudden just turning things into elves or advanced species willy-nilly, then the whole world would be full of elves and trolls and gnomes and ogres and oh my gosh, it'd be overstuffed and that would be a nightmare. Not to mention, we're assuming they're able to have children for basically their entire thousand year lifespans. But it couldn't just be giving someone the magic water that would put the counselors' minds in peril. What would happen if we took the water away? This brings me to explaining how the water works. It's explained as using enzymes that are essential to elven biology. If you didn't know, enzymes are basically catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions. For example, enzymes in your stomach help you break down food. Whatever enzymes or catalysts are in this water must be crazy effective. The elves use ingestible medicines that work instantly, something that would never happen if a human took them. The reason humans use injections so often is because injections are the fastest way to get something into your bloodstream, where most medicines take effect. Medicine that you ingest takes time to get to your bloodstream, like several hours. Think about eating a hamburger. It takes a while for that hamburger to be digested. It's not like an instantaneous thing. So these enzymes must be giving elves a crazy fast metabolism. Otherwise, there's no way that their medicines would work as well as they do. This crazy fast metabolism could explain their food too. It all tastes like human junk food that's high in calories and fat and sugar. And they would need a diet that's really high in calories and fats and sugars to keep up with such a high metabolism. Otherwise, they'd be hungry all the time. I mean, if sentient species use the water to drink, it's not a stretch to say that they would use it on their plants as well. There is more to the water though. I'm no geneticist, but every member of your species having blue eyes is a pretty big medical anomaly. Their blue eyes, the reason they almost always have one child at a time, their special abilities. Somehow, it's tweaking every piece of themselves until they seem almost perfect. I mean, it could explain the matching system. If you were to pair elves who had been using the water for much longer, who had a higher concentration of the water's pureness in their blood, it would ensure that future generations would remain perfect. And bad matches would make sense too. Having a lower concentration would make them less likely to have special abilities and more likely to have twins or triplets. So what happens if they stop drinking the water? Referring back to Herodotus's writing, the water had to be used constantly to be effective. Would it turn them back into humans? I don't think so. If it has enough of an effect on them to affect their genes and offspring, then some remnant of the water stays with the elves for life. But there must be some major consequence to not drinking the very thing that is essential to their elven biology. Something big, something important, something that would affect the mind. We hear time and time again that elven minds are fragile, shattering if they get too caught up in their own guilt. What if this fragility was only enhanced by not drinking the water? Humans don't have fragile minds. It's explained as due to the fact that we deal with so much pain and sorrow in our lives, but I think it's more than that. I think that not drinking the water for long periods of time causes a sort of withdrawal. It takes away the very things that were enhancing the elves and turns it against them. Instead of making them advance quickly, it degrades them really quickly. This would serve as a really good explanation for why elven minds are so fragile. After being exposed to the water, it's just really hard to live without it. After Alden's initial shattering, they mostly kept him on sedatives, never mentioning once giving him even a drop of youth in a bottle. And the same could be said for Prentice and Finton. They were in exile, a place that doesn't have much of anything, let alone their daily dose of youth in a bottle. That definitely could have played a part in how easily their minds were shattered.
Okay, Ophelia, but Vespera and the rest of the Neverseen probably don't have much access to youth in a bottle either. Why haven't they gone crazy?
That's a good question. Well, the Neverseens have spies in the Lost Cities, which, among other things, probably supply them with youth in a bottle. And Vespera is ancient! It could be possible that she even knows where some of the original springs are and is getting her water straight from the source. So, for the time being, the Neverseen are safe from neglecting their daily magical water intake. But could you imagine them using that against the Black Swan? Tainting their water so that it's useless, their minds fragile and ready to break at any moment. No wonder the council wants to keep this hidden away. And if you're wondering how most elves don't know about the water, if there's just springs everywhere, I don't think that the general population uses the springs. Somewhere along the line, I'm sure the elves got advanced enough to replicate the water so they could mass produce it. Otherwise, it would be really problematic getting the water filtered to all of these different cities. It would make more sense that only the super ancient elves would know where the original fountains were and maybe be using them. And even then, it's a maybe, because their current water seems to work just fine, and it's a lot more convenient than going down to the well every day to get your water. Could you imagine ancient elves drinking the mass-produced stuff and saying things like, "Ugh, this youth in a bottle is 0.9% regular water. They just don't make it like they used to." So, in summary, elven life, ability, and society, as we know it, is entirely based on something they take for granted. The water hardly mentioned, hardly worried about, hardly stressed over is the very key to their existence. And if the secret gets out, the elves could find themselves more vulnerable than ever before. All right, that's going to conclude my theory. Let me know what you think of this theory, as well as any theories you have on why elves live so long in the comments below. I am amazed at how much this water explains. It started with their lifespan and then just became a rabbit hole on every aspect of elven existence. And it has so much potential for more theories. Thank you so much for watching, and that'll be all from me. Keep her out.